Ozzy Osbourne smuggled a bottle into the rehab center, but suddenly a 12-year-old child appeared. In the quiet corridors of a Malibu rehab center, a world-famous rock legend was about to fall again. Until a 12-year-old boy asked a single, disarming question: "Are you here to secretly drink too?" If you love redemptive rock stories, subscribe to Voices of Darkness and share this video with your friends who love Ozzy Osbourne and stories that actually mean something. Ozzy Osbourne and the boy who taught him to be real. The corridor smelled like starch and lemon, a clean that felt clinical, almost accusatory. Fluorescent panels hummed overhead, a thin electric whine stitched through a long strip of marble and white doors. Ozzy Osbourne walked it like a man returning to the same river and hoping it would be different this time. His right hand slid into the pocket of the dark jacket he'd thrown over a gray hoodie. He felt the cool glass first, the neck of the bottle, then the weight of it. Amber flickered when he tilted it in his palm. He kept walking. He told himself the same old bargain, just a little. Just for an hour. Just for the pain that bit his bones and made the air feel heavy. Parkinson's was a thief with soft footsteps. It didn't shout. It took. Another door clicked shut behind him somewhere. A woman laughed too brightly into a phone. A wheeled cart rattled past, and the scent of antiseptic chased it. Ozzy drifted toward the window at the end of the hall where the ocean's horizon was just a seam of pale blue, as if someone had painted two halves of the world and forgotten how to blend them. He was thinking of Sharon, of the way hope looked on her face, brave and tired when he heard it. "Are you here to secretly drink something too?" He turned. The voice was gentle and frayed, like a sweater worn thin. A boy stood against the wall, 12 maybe, as if the plaster could carry his weight. Close-cropped blonde hair, navy hoodie a size too big, hands in the front pocket like he'd learned to keep them warm without gloves. The kid's gaze moved to Ozzy's pocket and then back to his eyes. Not accusing, not shocked, just knowing. "Excuse me, son," Ozzy said, the vowels still thick with Birmingham. His fingers fumbled the bottle deeper. He stalled. There was no good ending to that sentence. "My name's Danny," the boy said. "It's okay. I know my dad's story." "You're doing the same thing he does." The hallway's lights hummed. Ozzy felt a small tremor begin somewhere under his skin. "You shouldn't have to know that," he said. Danny shrugged like 12 going on 40. "I didn't get to pick." They stood in the shared quiet that comes after a truth. Background sounds became strangely exact. The beep of a distant monitor, the squeak of rubber soles. Ozzy looked at the boy and saw a dozen versions of himself. In Aston, at a kitchen table, listening to the cap twist off a bottle, learning that adults were loudest when they were most afraid. "You here alone?" Ozzy asked. "Mom's outside smoking," Danny answered, tipping his head toward the glass door at the end. "She started when Dad got sick. 2 packs a day now. Everyone's killing themselves differently." He said it so matter-of-factly that it hurt. "What about your dad?" "3rd floor," Danny said. "Liver's bad. They said maybe a transplant, but only if he stops." "It's a weird bargain. You only get the fix if you can prove you can live without it." His mouth tilted into something that almost was a smile and wasn't. Ozzy stared at his own reflection in the window. Tired eyes, hair like a storm that forgot where to rain. He'd come to this place again because of pain. Because fear wore new names, because old habits were easier to remember than new courage. He patted the bottle. It felt like a key. It felt like a lock. "Are you angry with him?" Ozzy asked. "I used to be," Danny said, and his voice softened at the edges. "When he forgot birthdays. When Mom cried and said she was fine, but then she wasn't. But lately, I'm more sad than angry. I figured out he's unhappy with himself. And you can't give what you don't have." The word slid into Ozzy like a quiet knife. He thought of Jack and Kelly and Amy, of conversations interrupted by apologies that never learned to stand. He thought of backstage nights that blurred into a single dark hallway that smelled like this one. "You're very smart," he said. "For 12. "I had to grow up," Danny said simply. "When Dad got small, I had to get big. I know the PIN for the bank card. I make sure the bills get posted. If I don't, they don't." Ozzy's hand left the bottle. For a long breath, he held it there in his pocket and felt the shape of the choice. He had been 12 once. He had been a son with a dragon for a father. And he had become the dragon, thinking that made him a legend when it only made him a man hiding from mirrors. "You know what?" Ozzy said, voice low. When I was a kid in Aston, my dad drank after shifts. Factory heat still in his clothes, hands rough. I used to think, I'll never do that to my kids. Then I grew up and found new ways to tell the same lie. Danny's eyes lifted to him, clear and steady. Then maybe today you can tell a different story. They found seats on a vinyl bench opposite a framed print of some coastal cliff that looked like a postcard someone had hung by mistake. The bench squeaked. The print sea was a color no sea ever keeps for long. Why do you really drink? Danny asked, simple as a hand extended for pain, Ozzy said. It was automatic. It fell out like a coin. Is that the real reason? The boy asked, not unkind. Ozzy looked down at his hands. They were hands that had learned chords and crowds. They had held microphones and children and also bottles, and lately they'd shaken, making everything more fragile. The cups of tea, the silence, his pride. I get scared, he said finally. The words surprised him with how ordinary they were. All the noise, shows and albums and lights, sometimes that's just a louder version of the fear. What if they stop liking me? What if I'm not good enough without the myth? The bottle's easier than the question. My dad says something like that, Danny replied. He says he's tired and stressed and the drink takes the edge off. But afterwards he says he's more afraid because he knows he said things he has to be sorry for. The bench squeaked as Ozzy leaned back. When I drink, the house goes quiet, he admitted. I've seen it. Even with staff, the way doors close softer, like everyone's walking past a sleeping bear. Dragon, Danny corrected gently. At our house it's a dragon. Then smaller. I love my sober dad. He reads me stories. He tries. A thin ache threaded Ozzy's chest. He could hear his children's laughter from years ago. He could hear himself promise he'd be around for breakfast, then hear the silence when he wasn't. He could see Sharon at a window, watching the road for headlights that came too late or not at all. I write better sober, he said, and the truth of it rang dull, but clean. Most of the stuff people say they love, I wrote it when my head was clear. Then maybe the real you is the one people love, Danny said. The bottle in his pocket grew heavy as a verdict. From somewhere near the nurse's station, a radio brief crackled. An old soul song, a chorus about going home. The air conditioner sighed. Down the hall, a door opened and closed. You said he might get a transplant, Ozzy said. Your dad. If he stops, Danny said. He says he will sometimes, then he doesn't. Maybe he needs help, Ozzy said slowly, as if the sentence were a room he hadn't visited in a while. Maybe I do too. First step is admitting, Danny recited, a line he'd probably read on a pamphlet. Second is asking for help. Third is throwing away what you brought here to break you. Ozzy reached into his pocket. The glass chimed softly against his ring. He turned the bottle, watched the slow wave crest and settle inside. It looked like a sunset trapped wrong. I don't know who I am without this, he whispered. The real you, Danny answered. Don't you want your kids to know that person? Ozzy stared at the label, at the little icon of a crest that pretended the liquid had heritage instead of gravity. He stood. His legs felt like new stilts. The trash can stood at the end of the hall, stainless steel and simple. He walked toward it. Are you sure? Danny asked, keeping pace. Hope made his voice brighter and more afraid. No, Ozzy answered, but I'm more sure I don't want to be a dragon anymore. He lifted the lid, looked once more at a version of himself that had held so much sway, and he let it go. The bottle hit metal, one clear note like a bell, and then his hand was empty. He stared at it like it might tell him what came next. For a moment, nothing changed. Lights hummed, wheels rattled. But something small shifted, an alignment like a vertebrae easing into place. Danny clapped, a single round of astonished joy. That's real courage, he said. It's a start, Ozzy said softly. Courage is a long game. He didn't sleep that night. Courage had no lullaby. It paced the room with him while the walls clicked as they cooled. Sometime near dawn, he dialed Sharon. Sharon, he said, and his voice cracked on the first syllable like a door that hadn't been opened in years. I need to tell you some things. I can't promise I'll never be afraid again, but I threw away the bottle and I want help. On the other end, there was a pause, then the sound of a breath that tried not to be a sob. Are you telling me the truth right now? She asked. Yes, he said. The word felt like a hand placed on a table, steadying, offering. Then I'll be here, she answered, and the sentence was simple as a vow. 3 days later, he found Danny outside a room on the 3rd floor. The boy's eyes were wet, but he was smiling like someone who had found a path where there hadn't been one. 3 days, Danny said before Ozzy could ask. He didn't drink. He apologized to me. The sentence seemed to baffle him even as it warmed him. He said he doesn't want me to carry his fear. He wants to learn how not to be small. Pride moved through Ozzy like sunlight through blinds, thin, gentle, real. That's beautiful, son. I told him, if even Ozzy Osbourne can change, you can too, Danny said, glancing sideways with mischief. So don't mess this up, okay? Ozzy laughed, a short surprise sound that shook off some of the hallway's tired air. Deal. They made a ritual of it then. Not elaborate, just small visits in hushed halls exchanging simple updates. Ozzy talked of meetings where grown men said hard things and looked each other in the eye anyway. He learned to sit with pain without sweetening it with poison. He slept and didn't sometimes, but didn't run. He walked outside and let Malibu's morning fog rest on his hair like a blessing he hadn't earned and was trying to. Danny talked about a father who said, "I love you," and then made it a habit instead of a headline. About a mother who cut down to 1 pack and then to half and then to gum and sunflower seeds. About homework that finally made sense because the kitchen didn't hum with fear. "Do you still get scared?" Danny asked once as they watched a janitor mop a rectangle of floor into a shy shine. "Every day," Ozzy said. "But the fear doesn't get to drive. I put it in the back seat with a biscuit and I tell it to hush." He smiled, and the smile felt human, not heroic. 6 months stretched and softened. The Pacific learned new blues. Ozzy learned new mornings. He discovered the exact way the sun fell on the rehab courtyard at 9:15, how the jacarandas scattered purple like confetti in June, how tea could be an anchor if you let it. He learned how to say sorry without a comma. He learned how to listen to his children without crafting replies. He learned how hands that had trembled could still make music if they were guided by gratitude instead of panic. Danny's father, Mike, made the list. Then he made the cut. Surgery days are long days that stretch the clock's bones. Ozzy sat with Sharon and Danny with his mother in different waiting rooms full of terrible coffee and good magazines from last year. When it was done, a young doctor arrived with visible relief and a grin he couldn't hide. "He did well," the doctor said. "Now the real work." "I like real work," Danny said, and Ozzy believed him. 2 families found each other properly one late afternoon on Malibu Beach. The tide was outgoing, polite. Seagulls stitched crooked lines across a sky that looked freshly ironed. Mike walked slow, hand in his son's, a little gray around the temples, a lot more present in his gaze. "Mr. Osbourne," he said, voice steady, "you gave my boy courage. That's a gift I'll try to deserve." "You gave it to each other," Ozzy said. "The best gifts do that. They grilled too many hot dogs and burned half the buns." Danny tried to skim a stone and threw it like a wish instead. Sharon laughed at nothing and everything. They took a photo where nobody made a face to hide anything, and when they looked at it later, they saw a strange, ordinary miracle. People deciding to carry what was theirs and set down what wasn't. As the sun flattened into the horizon, Danny ran down the beach and back, kicking up little ghosts of sand. "He taught me to ride," he announced, breathless, pointing at his father. "Properly. We didn't even fall. Falling's not the worst thing," Mike said. "Staying down is—" "Listen to the man," Ozzy said, raising his paper cup. "He's got wisdom now." They laughed and it landed light. Backstage rooms all smell a little the same. Gaffer tape, electricity, fruit that looks better than it tastes. Birmingham's venue had that familiar buzz, the pulse of a crowd finding its pitch before the lights went down. It had been a year since the corridor, and Ozzy stood there with a cup of tea, steam fogging a small circle from his glasses. He felt steady like a tree that had learned wind. On the dressing table lay a folded note. The handwriting was junior, confident and crooked. "Ozzy, I saw you on TV. You look like the real you now. Dad looks like the real him too. We both won. Love, Danny." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, everything was the same and kinder. On stage, the first chords came like a door opening onto a room he hadn't entered in a while. The crowd swelled. Love is loud that way, and for a heartbeat he heard the old question circle back like a bird. What if I'm not enough? He listened to it like you listen to something that used to own you and now pays rent. Then he sang. Mama, I'm coming home, rose out of him like a letter you write and finally send. The words didn't fix anything that didn't want to be fixed, but they lit the road he was walking. He sang not to prove anything, but because singing was how he told the truth. In the second verse, he saw Sharon in the wings. He didn't just think of, his children, their faces not in memory but in presence, aligned through time like a family portrait that had learned forgiveness. He saw a hallway and a boy who called fear by its name and didn't bow to it. The crowd carried the last chorus, thousands of voices making a sound wide enough to step into. When it washed over him, he understood something small and new. The legend survived without the dragon. The myth was never the point. The man was enough. After the show, he sat with Sharon and held her hand. He didn't say, "I'll never be afraid again." He said, "When I'm afraid, I'll tell you." It was the kind of sentence that builds a home. Recovery isn't a miracle. It's a practice. It's tea instead of whiskey, a call instead of silence, a walk in fog instead of a sprint into night. It's remembering that dragons are just stories we tell to excuse the fire in our throats. Months later, Ozzy visited the rehab center again. Not to check in, but to walk the corridor where he'd once made a noise that sounded like a bell. The stainless steel bin was still there, indifferent and faithful. He stood a second, then kept going. Outside, a 12-year-old who was nearly 13 threw a paper airplane that drifted and dove, and finally landed upright in a bush as if the world were rigged for hope. Danny spotted him and waved. Beside him, Mike lifted a thermos in salute. They looked good, the way people look when they've learned to keep their promises one sunrise at a time. "Still writing letters?" Ozzy asked, nodding at the airplane. "Sometimes," Danny said. "Mostly living them." They walked the block once, talking about guitars and football and the utter mystery of how seagulls always know when you've bought chips. There were no big speeches to make. They'd made them. The rest was showing up at the corner they paused. Traffic sighed. A dog barked twice at nothing. The world was so ordinary it felt sacred. "Thank you," Mike said again, because gratitude echoes. "Thank you," Ozzy answered, "because it does." They parted. The day went on. Somewhere, someone threw something away and someone else held on. And between those two motions, a life learned how to be lived. Sometimes in life's darkest corridors, we meet the most unexpected teachers. And sometimes a 12-year-old child is wiser than a 74-year-old legend. If this story moved you, subscribe to Voices of Darkness, like the video, and share it with your friends who love Ozzy. If you love Ozzy, hit subscribe and share this with every Ozzy fan you know. More stories are coming for the ones who believe it's never too late to come home.